The Commander Rules Committee might have just given out their biggest update yet. Even with no changes, we have really big insight as to how they want to move the format ahead, their philosophy around bans and unbans, and just how they view the social aspect of this game in general. It's really important to take some of these ideas that they post forward, especially as the format wants to move forward in this Universes Beyond world, and just with so many cards entering the format on a month-to-month basis, it's important to have the understanding of the community behind them. Now, there's a lot of discussion around here and criticism for the rules committee and the CAG, the advisory group as well. And a lot of folks talking about how there's a lot of preventative measures being taken, cards that aren't being put into the format that we don't even see the background work of. And that's all of that I really want to touch on in today's video. But really, I want to center the discussion around this primary piece of criticism. So Dan at DTrain94 says, if you're not going to do anything about Orcish Bowmasters, at least give us a little unban as a treat. The format is so stale right now. Now, my gut reaction to this is an absolutely wild statement. As a Commander player that plays relatively often, at least once or twice a week, I can tell you the format is not stale. Because of the fact that there are so many ways to play, so many cards entering the format, so many decks, and of course this becomes a resource idea, but there's so many ways to engage with the format in general. There's so many commanders, there's so many cards that you can add in and out, there's so many win conditions that you can change around, and so many things that you can do to really increase your play patterns in the format and your enjoyment of it in general. And before I come back to some of the answers or the counterpoints to Dan, I want to go into the philosophy itself. So Commander being a non-traditional format, there's other where other formats are engaged to create an environment where continuous improvement and non-zero-sum gameplay are desired and incentivized. Commander offers an environment where those goals are not the only things to aspire to. The Rules Committee decisions are informed by gameplay philosophy that is expressed and reinforced by its rules and ban list. So there's a whole social aspect. The Commander is social. They want to encourage positive and communal experiences where players can bond over shared experience of gaming, help players communicate their preferences and arrive at a shared set of expectations. So this is kind of going around that idea of rule zeroing in certain cards. So if you wanted to play with the Universes Beyond card, with an unset card that may not be as intuitive to folks, then this is the way to do that. Have that conversation, use your communication skills, work with your friends to create these inviting spaces for someone that might be coming in for the first time. And these communal experiences, I should say, of these big gameplay moments, like have those big Crater Hoof Behemoths, those overrun moments, that big storm turn. Having experiences like this is a social aspect, and how people react, especially in a positive way, is going to, be very important to that. So Commander is also a format of creative expression. It promotes an environment where players are not pressured to conform to any specific method of deck building, maximize the available card pool, and incorporate new official Magic content into the format as it's created. And so this is touching on Universes Beyond, adding new formats of play in there, especially different modalities of play, right? So stuff like Plane Chase, adding that in to spice up your Commander games, and also maximizing the available card pool. So going with alternative forms. So maybe you're looking for a board wipe or a way to destroy an enchantment. Maybe there's a destroy enchantment out there that's a sorcery that gives you a benefit that's specifically good for your Commander, but then you were playing destroy target enchantment at instant speed, which you thought was better because it's instant, but maybe the sorcery one has a better implication or a better benefit to your deck based on your Commander. And then promoting an environment where players aren't pressured to conform. So this is kind of the idea around net decking, where competitive EDH is a whole other thing in itself. And this kind of goes back to the criticism of Dan saying the format is stale. Once you get to a very high level status of EDH, games tend to really conform to one or the other. There are optimal things to do, there are very good things to do, and you tend to lean on those, right? When you're playing blue, you are playing certain cards, you're playing the expropriates, you're playing the big bounce spells, you're playing the draw spells. When you're building your mana bases, you're playing fetch lands, you're playing shocks. Like, that's how you're kind of conforming to deck building. But when you're in mid-low power, stuff like that really is a wide pool of anything and everything. And so that's what's important about creativity. And then the last piece is stability. Commander is stable. Commander players have become emotionally invested in their decks through play and personalization, and that bond is important as part of the experience. Players who build Commander decks should be confident that they'll be able to play with them for over a long period of time. Format management decisions are intended to, when necessary, make changes, even large ones, but not for the purpose of defining a meta game or shaking things up or in a reaction to a hot topic of the day. And so this goes back to what Dan was saying in their criticism. Minimize changes that require players to actively maintain their decks. And so this isn't like constructed play, right? So we don't want to shake things up. We don't want to define a metagame. You know, when Splinter Twin was taken all over Modern and everything, and recently with stuff like Fury and still the Modern Rises 2 Elementals, they don't want to make any changes like they did there in those constructed formats to shake things up because of the social aspect, because of the creative aspect. There isn't necessarily a defined metagame for Commander to play. So when a lot of people say that they see a certain card being played a lot, that just might be in their small group, and they could rule zero that out. They could find different answers and they can adapt to the pod they're in, especially just because it's not 1v1. Different players can react to different things in different ways, and especially in low power pods without tutors and everything, every game plays out very differently. So there's all these conversations that you can have about defining a metagame, defining what you're doing, but a lot of this can happen at a local perception as well. So at your local LGS, at your local meta, Commander players are likely to be doing only a certain amount of things. There aren't going to be all these Commander players with 50 different decks. Everyone's going to have maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 decks to really swap around to based on what they're feeling like. And a lot of times, I think people forget that, especially in terms of stability, a lot of times you are going to be losing a lot of games of Commander. And that's where I want to kind of transition in this next portion here. Because the games are taken up by 4 players on average, right? If you have a pot of 3, if you have a pot of 5, it might be a bit more rare. But in a 4-player pod, there are 4 people. And by that math, simple, look, I'm no mathematician, but I believe 25% of the time, that means you're going to be winning the game. That means the majority of the time you are not going to be winning those games, and you have to be okay with that as a Commander player. That is the social contract that you sign. The hidden secret that all Commander players agree to is that 25% of the time you are going to be in an even playing field winning the game. Majority of the time you're not going to get there, and that is what this creative aspect, the stable aspect, and the social aspect all come together. The social aspect of going to play with your friends, being social, being out there and just meeting new people, having new ideas, and those ideas leading to creativity, learning new things, learning about new cards, understanding how your deck plays, learning about new lines, and then ultimately the stability of it, where when all that starts to come together, you have a great play experience and you realize that things aren't as broken as they appear, and conversations and certain card changes can really change up how a certain pod can play out, certain night can play out when you're playing Commander. And so that's where I want to bring this back to this conversation with Dan, talking about how Orcish Bowmasters, a little unbanned as a treat. So they're saying Orcish Bowmasters is a problem because they play relatively high power pods. So Cal, great cEDH content creator as well, just great personality on Twitter around the EDH space. New Philosophy Doc says they'll do exactly not this. So the whole stable idea of, they won't do things for the purposes of defining a metagame or shaking things up. The format is so stale right now. Give us an unban as a treat. So that's like shaking things up. Metagame is boring. Dan says unbanning cards would rarely, if ever, invalidate people's existing decks, and actively maintaining our decks is a huge part of the fun. I've always wanted to put something new together, but there just isn't anything that seems interesting. So this is a person that is overstimulated and just is extremely lazy. I'm calling you out right now. There are, look, go down to this. There are currently 26,000, almost 27,000 legal cards in Commander, with 840 new cards printed so far in 2024. Commander is a format that doesn't need unbans to shake things up. You're telling me there are 27,000 legal cards in Commander and there's nothing interesting for you? That's your fault. That's your problem. That is a perception issue. You need to force yourself to be comfortable outside of your bounds. And I talk about this with a lot of my friends too, in real life outside of Magic, where a lot of them will get into this idea of like, I only want to play games to win. I only play competitive first-person shooters. Gaming is dead. These are the same people that will say that and not play single-player games. They won't play games for themselves. They won't play games that outside of just the idea of purely winning. And that's all that gets stuck in their head. And along those lines, bring that into Commander. Why are you playing every single game to win? The majority of the time, you are not going to be winning. This isn't like Constructed, where, especially in Constructed and even playing field, 50% of the time you're going to win. That feels a lot better. But here, only 25% of the time in an even playing field, you're going to win. So why are you stuck up on this idea of winning, optimizing, and doing all the best thing you can do, and you feel like you're only losing to Orcish Bowmasters? Why don't you play like a -1/-1 effect? Why don't you play cards that prevent ETBs? Why don't you play, look, the classic age-old thing of more removal? There's a million things that I could say that could, prevent, just be an answer to Orcish Bowmaster, especially at high level tables. And I think just playing lower power stuff is a great example too. There's a lot of lower power tables out there that won't be playing Orcish Bowmaster. They can't afford Orcish Bowmaster. That's a lot of money for a singular card that you're only going to see like not that often, especially without tutors. You're not going to be seeing it the majority of your games. So again, this is just like a really unfair criticism. And then especially that first part where like unbanning cards if rarely will invalidate people's existing decks. If it doesn't invalidate the deck, that means it, by extension, my assumption is that it wouldn't really make a change to the format, because if you unban it, it wouldn't really make a change. So why unban something, right? So if you're saying unbanning things would rarely invalidate other people's decks, that in my sense would mean that the unban wouldn't do anything. So why would they do it? There's not a reason to do it. And I will say that the counterpoint is, why not? I am largely of the stance that we should be unbanning more cards, and that's from a constructed player's perspective. But in Commander, I think largely this is okay. I think the Commander cards that are on the ban list do a lot of invalidation or just aren't really good fun things. And they did do that one cEDH ban with, I believe, Flash to help that format once, but largely speaking, they are not doing that anymore, and I think they're taking a really good direction with this. But I want to hear your thoughts down below. What do you think about this direction that the Commander Rules Committee is taking around just the bans in general? No changes whatsoever. Is this the direction that we need to be taking with Commander, or should we be taking a more aggressive stance in banning and unbanning? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I think largely speaking, I'm okay with no changes. I think this is a great direction. I'm so happy to get a clarification on their general rules policy, and I'm happy to just like be able to reference this. Like when someone talks about a ban, like it's their philosophy. They don't want to do that to shake things up, or they believe we have the ability to answer the format here. So I think that's really great. But let me know what you think. Sound off in the comments.